Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us to today's Texas Wesleyan SRNA podcast. We appreciate you being here. My name is Marcus.
And I'm Mary.
Our topic today is the involvement of venture capital firms in anesthesia groups and how does that affect patient care, how are CRNAs affected, anesthesiologists overall. We will have a special guest today. Her name is Dr. Megan Holland. She shall join us shortly. With that being said, let's talk about the background of venture capital firms and their involvement in anesthesia groups.
I think when we were originally assigned this topic, I was very intimidated because I didn't understand what venture capitalists were. I barely understood the concept of an anesthesia group. So I think us being assigned this topic, or us choosing this topic, has been a blessing and a curse, because I found out a lot about the healthcare community, but also kind of the dark sides of it as well. So I think the best way to start it off is just by asking, what is private equity and venture capitalism? And plain and simple, it's just an alternative investment for anesthesia groups to receive funding from a major corporation with the expense of giving up shares or ownership in the business. So we have to kind of ask ourselves, what are the positives and what are the negatives of this kind of investment? So the negatives, a huge one, is the risk of monopolizing through price arrangements with existing groups. This will eliminate competition and increase the patient costs, or through market allocation arrangements with another large anesthesia group through aggressive non-compete arrangements or clauses. Another negative is the investor involvement in healthcare decisions. They can put some pressure on price cutting that can impact patient care. I think a major one that we think of as students and in school is we're always told Sugammadex is very expensive. But if it's available to you and patients have significant risk factors, or you believe as a healthcare provider that neostigmine would not be the better option to reverse them, if you make the decision to use Sugammadex, there may be a trickle down from your investors that we need to do some price cutting, or that your decision to get there wasn't in the benefit of the price, right? And so this just leads to increased focus on profitability as opposed to leading with clinical quality. And the final negative is just reduced autonomy and control of groups' decision making. There's always a risk of being sold between major investor groups, and that can leave a real question mark of who the group's ownership belongs to. Finally, we're not naive enough to think that there's not major positives for going with the large investor. And so some of those being the financial resources to technology, equipment, and being able to hire additional staff because of this financial backing. These are typically businessy entrepreneurs or businessy leaders, so utilizing their expertise can be very beneficial in order to run the anesthesia group, especially if you don't have anesthesia or business experience and you've only been from the healthcare clinical perspective. Obviously, the networking that comes with that businessy end can be a huge variable for why anesthesia groups go this direction. They have out-of-hospital market experience. They are professionals in the political world, so they have connections with governors, senators, and representatives. And we all know in healthcare that can go a long way. And then finally, it can mitigate the financial risk that comes with being an independent owner at times that economic difficulty is in your forecast.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was awesome. Now we have an idea of the pros and cons of venture capital firms.
Okay, Megan Holland, thank you so much for joining us today. Can we just start with you giving us a little bit of your background and what you do?
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I graduated anesthesia school from the TCU program in 2012. Prior to that, I got my bachelor's at Texas Women's University, graduated from there in 2006, worked for 3 years at Parkland in their trauma surgery ICU before going to anesthesia school. Did my training in anesthesia school in Wichita Falls, graduated there in December 2012. Worked for the next 10 years at a few big hospitals in Fort Worth. I started out at Plaza Medical Center, which is now called um, Medical City Fort Worth. About 2016, I ended up going full-time over at Harris Southwest. And then about 2021, I did what a lot of CRNAs are doing now, and I started doing a lot of PRN work just at various places, kind of filling my schedule that way. Like the flexibility that was giving me, I was wanting to branch out and do more 1099 work. At that time, I was doing mostly W-2 with the big anesthesia group in town, which is USAP. So I joined a Facebook group looking for different advice on that and, kind of what other CRNAs were doing, and ended up meeting a CRNA through that named Tammy, and started talking to her. She owns a ketamine clinic out in Midland. And I got on the phone with her and kind of started doing my research on it and kind of finding out exactly what all it entailed. Got on the phone with her in December of 2021 and ended up talking to her for like an hour and a half, and loved everything she had to say about what she was doing. At that point, I think she's been in business for about 4 years, and looked at my husband and said, I know exactly what I want to do now. I'm going to open one of these clinics. And so I did. Opened the practice in 2022 with the first location over in Fort Worth. Ended up getting very busy very quickly, much faster than I thought it was going to. Ended up hiring some staff later on that summer, full-time nurse, receptionist. Started needing some days off because I was working a lot. So my good friend Travis, who I knew from Medical City, ended up coming to help me like 1 day a week. And it was going so well, I actually offered him a business and practice partnership. So he accepted that. Bought into the practice this spring, and we are in the process right now of opening our second location in Weatherford, starting to see patients here hopefully next week.
Awesome.
Yeah,
oh my gosh, that's exciting. Yes.
Congratulations on everything going well. That's
yes,
awesome.
for you. So I heard USAP as far as being a major venture capitalist involved group. Is there any other experience that I missed in there as far as a big investor group being involved?
Other than USAP, when I first came out of anesthesia school, I actually worked for North Star at Plaza, and that was actually the year that they did not renew. They lost the contract at Plaza.
Okay.
And so I ended up staying on, and that's when I got hired with USAP, and stayed with them throughout. I also had I did like some vacation 1099 work at JPS last year with Sound Anesthesia. I was contracted with them. So I have a little bit of experience with them, not nearly as much as USAP.
Right. Awesome. So how, as a provider, would you say it was working under a venture capitalist invested group?
Not great. I think anybody who's worked with USAP will tell you that they are under market as far as salary goes.
Okay.
They try to tout that they have amazing benefits. The only really great benefit they had that they no longer have was their profit sharing 401k, which was really good. The first several years I worked with USAP, they had a very good profit sharing. And you were vested after a certain time, and it was a considerable amount that they would put into your 401k each year. That went away without really a whole lot of notice, and a lot of CRNAs are really upset about that. And they definitely, my experience with them is that a lot of their sites are understaffed because they don't really offer market value, especially now that the rates and stuff for CRNAs has gone up so much in the last couple of years, really since COVID. They've not kept up with market value, and they don't do a good job of that at all.
Right.
It was not my favorite. I would much have rather worked for like a small privately owned group than work for a big corporate group again.
Provider, how do you think that impacts your patient care, or does it have an impact on patient care at all?
Oh, it definitely does. As far as just the work environment, when the CRNAs are overworked and understaffed, they're exhausted, they don't have the patience, they don't have the desire a lot of times to be there because they're required to work overtime, or they're required to do extra call or work post call, which is not safe for the patients and it's not ideal for anybody. And then just as far as how the patients are, processed and everything. I know there was a lot of confusion because there's been questions about, does USAP take my insurance? And there's been a lot of stuff with USAP not taking certain major insurances for North Texas. And so the patients would be asking us that, and I'm like, I don't know, I have nothing to do with that. That's all going to be through corporate. So that was, got to be frustrating for the patients to not know what's covered and what's not as far as what their insurance, their anesthesia bill is going to be after insurance reimbursement.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think it definitely impacts the patient care.
Right. So as a business owner, we know that anesthesia groups, when they take on venture capitalists, they consume a lot of the ownership that goes along with that. For your perspective as a business owner, what do you think that loss of control has as far as like the company's direction or like the progress of the company?
I just know, I mean, as a business owner, I bring a lot of my values to the business. So, I mean, one of the things that I really wanted to do with Vigio Wellness was I wanted patients to feel seen and heard. You know, we serve a mental health and chronic pain population, which is often ignored or underserved. So that was really a huge goal of mine. So I can definitely see how if you bring in a venture capitalist and their main focus is revenue and the bottom line, you know, they're not going to be paying as much attention to the actual patient experience. I mean, they will to the point where they want them to come back and they want them to, you know, give good reviews on Google. But as far as the actual patient and caring about how they do, no, they don't really care.
Right. In your mind, do you have an idea of like what an acceptable amount of ownership would be in like to sacrifice for the sake of the funding? Like, do you have a number or percentage in your head that would be like, this is how much I would give up in order to get the funding but still maintain my ownership?
I mean, I would definitely still want majority ownership.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, you know, if I was a sole owner, which I'm not anymore, but when I was, I would have wanted to maintain at least, you know, 51%. And even now, as a joint owner, I would want to maintain, you know, majority ownership.
Right.
And I know Mary and I, we've talked to other venture capital firms. Some believe that venture capital firms, they buy out all these practices and they create a monopoly in a certain area. Mm-hmm. In your opinion, do you think the government should step in at a certain point saying, okay, we cannot have this monopoly, or how can we prevent these monopolies from happening?
I think instead of like the government necessarily stepping in and stopping that, because I do believe in growth, especially as a business owner. I believe in the, you know, freedom to grow your business as much as you want, but I think there definitely needs to be incentives for the small business owners, for the companies that are not multi-million-dollar anesthesia groups, to do what they need to do. So, you know, if there's a way to incentivize that, I would be more pro that, more pro incentivizing the small guy, you know, to grow and to serve.
Right. Absolutely. So in your experience, do venture capital firms like contribute to rising healthcare costs, or have you seen that as a direct correlation in any of your experiences?
Not really. I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head about with my experience with the anesthesia groups, the way that they do the contracts with the hospitals and stuff. And like a lot of times there's like subsidies involved and surcharges. Like I know my experience at Plaza was they were supposed to run like a certain number of ORs, you know, during the day. And then at 3:00, they were supposed to come down to a smaller amount. And that like never happened the way it was supposed to. So I'm sure the hospitals happened to pay out buku, you know, surcharges to the anesthesia group because they weren't running things the way they were supposed to. I mean, ideally that should incentivize them to run the board the way it's supposed to be run, but it never really happened.
Right.
So, I mean, I guess I could see how that might trickle down to the patients. So I guess my answer would be maybe.
Excellent. Thank you.
I mean, you know, the billing system and insurance, it's so complex. We all know from experience what is being charged. You know, it is, you know, you look at any healthcare bill and you're trying to say, what is this? Where is this coming from? And everything like that.
Mm-hmm. I think when I was looking over the USAP kind of their suing claims is that the Federal Trade Commission is going with that. They're going into pricing agreements with competing anesthesia groups. And so they'll both set the same price. So then it's not the hospitals coming in at that. But then like if USAP raises, then the other one raises. So it's like that's the only down effect that I've seen as far as, and that's the concern for the Federal Trade Commission was that perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What would your advice be to providers or new CRNAs or, you know, new providers that have to take on venture capital firms or join a venture capital run anesthesia group on how they can prioritize patient-centered care and outcomes rather than it's all about the dollar?
I guess, I mean, if you end up working for a group like USAP, which I did for many years, and I mean, I think I gave pretty good patient care during that time. I mean, a lot of it is prioritizing yourself, you know, as far as your self-care and, when you are overworked or you're, feel like you're doing more than you were signed up to do, just kind of standing up for yourself. And I mean, anytime I had an issue with the schedule or an issue with something that's going on, I didn't stay quiet about it. I would vocalize my concerns to my manager, and if it didn't get addressed, or not to the manager, but to the chief, if it didn't get addressed with him, then, you go to the director. And if it doesn't get addressed with them, then you start, you kind of go your way up the chain. That's tricky to do as a new grad because you kind of want to stay under the radar, but you still have to stand up for yourself,
Right.
Especially when it comes to, how it impacts the way you're delivering your care. And so you don't want to be like in an unsafe environment because you've just worked a 24-hour call shift and they're asking you to stay to do a case the next morning. That's just not okay.
Right.
I will say too, just in the ketamine world, venture capitalists is definitely a hot topic. There's a large one called Irwin Naturals that has bought up several ketamine clinics, including the marketing company that I currently work with, which is called Ketamine Media. And they seem to be, really ethical, and they're kind of doing things the way they should be done in the ketamine world. But there's definitely been others that are not, and they're running the show, unsafely, and they're changing, the way clinics are doing their business, and it's not been a good thing.
Right.
There was one major ketamine clinic here in Fort Worth called Ketamine Wellness Center that was located in Hearst. They had several, I think 12 or 13 locations over like 6 or 7 different states. And the guy that started the company was in, I think, Arizona. He had like 1 or 2 locations there, partnered with this venture capitalist firm, and they increased their locations nationwide. They opened all the other locations over a period of like 2 years, and they went bankrupt. And so now the clinic had to shut all their doors. There was no notice given to patients. Patients were showing up to appointments, not having no idea the building was locked. There's a lock on the door, with a bolt and everything, and they had no clue. So it was not handled well at all, and it was all because of this venture capital firm that took over and then ran out of money. There's another major one in the Northeast that the same thing happened with them. They were based out of Toronto, but they partnered with the wrong venture capitalists. They ran out of money, and now they're having to shut all their doors.
Wow.
So it's definitely something that's impacting more than just, anesthesia groups. It's pretty wild.
Right. Have you been approached by a group as far as any negotiations that you've gone through or anything like that?
I was approached by somebody who identified himself as a venture capitalist. Actually, it was last summer, so I'd only been open for like a month or two. Mm-hmm. And I ended up meeting with him once for dinner with him and his wife, and the whole thing was super shady, and I think this guy had no clue what he was doing or anything. And I just told him, I was like, I think this is a terrible idea. I don't know what you're doing before this, but you need to go back to that because this is not working for you. So, I mean, yes, honestly, I don't think it was really a legit thing. I think this guy kind of got swindled by the big company that he was supposedly working for. But a friend of mine who works down in Houston, who has a clinic down there, he did. Irwin Naturals, the same one that is buying up places now. He got approached by them last summer and got offered a pretty good deal. And he ended up not taking it. He didn't want to give up his ownership, so he did not partner with them. Which I think was smart, especially given all the closures and everything that's happening right now.
Yeah,
I think it was a good decision on his part.
Yeah.
Right.
What advice do you have for CRNAs wanting to open their own business, their own ketamine clinic or pain management? Anything like that?
Say anybody who's wanting to open their own business, just go into it with open eyes. Know that you will work more than you've ever worked in your life, and you probably won't get paid very much for it in the beginning. But if you're good, you'll grow, and it'll end up being worthwhile financially as well. But it's incredibly rewarding. It's one of the best things I've ever done. I actually love what I do now. It's definitely stressful. Owning a business has all its own stressors and everything, and with it. But as far as going to work every day and knowing that I'm helping people and that believing what I do, lots of times in anesthesia where I was taking a patient back to the OR and just thinking like, why are we doing this? Like, this is a terrible idea. Mm-hmm. But I don't have that anymore because I believe in what I'm doing now, which is pretty awesome. So
awesome. I'd just like to say, I think from an SRNA perspective, and we have a big future ahead of us, it's very inspiring to hear how you've just worked your way kind of through the system and gained all this experience and really applied that to your business now. So huge props to you. That's very inspiring.
Well, I learned a ton from my senior CRNAs. I mean, everything from, the professors that taught me in school to the ones I trained under in my training. I mean, even now I have mentors, who aren't doing ketamine, but I still definitely see them as mentors because I learned so much from them over the years.
Right. Absolutely. We don't have any further questions. Do you have any last comments you'd like to make as far as the venture capitalist or private equity involvement, or any last comments, I guess?
Not that I can think of. I'm glad I don't work for one anymore.
Yeah. Awesome.
I don't miss USAP at all.
Yes. Especially now with their big lawsuit. Goodness.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Crazy. Well, thank you so much for joining us. That was more than we could have ever asked for. So we are so appreciative.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
Yeah, I appreciate it greatly. Thank you, Megan.
Absolutely. Gus was a big help too,
Yes, so cute.
We see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It all opens well and runs smoothly.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, you'll have to come see it when we get everything up and running.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys. Y'all have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
All right, everyone. That is it for today's podcast. I am Marcus Milburn.
And I'm Mary.
Thank you for listening. I hope this time provided further understanding and a different perspective on private equity involvement in anesthesia groups. You all have a great day.